All right, all you devils out there, how's it going? Sam, I'm coming to you here on Sunday the 31st. Now, members, you know I was out of town for a couple of days. I went off to Vegas for a few, celebrate my anniversary with my wife, and I'm just back as of yesterday afternoon, kind of finally get my head clear. Oh, Vegas is fun, but it does take its toll. So I think perhaps the fact that we're doing the update here on Sunday is not a bad thing, because had we been doing this on Friday, we might have had a different view based on the little pump that we got off of Elon's changing his Twitter profile. So this interesting times in the markets, right? We all know what's going on in traditional assets here, and there's certainly plenty of volatility here. So this is certainly the time where technical analysis is something that I would encourage you to want to lean into, because particularly as we talk Elliott Wave. What is Elliott Wave best at? Really, where it shines most is trying to quantify and qualify crowd dynamics of fear and greed. And that's so much what's happening across the markets right now, as we see fundamentals distorting beyond any traditional metric. And now it truly is crowd dynamics. So we've got a lot of things happening, not only in traditionals, but we're also seeing it in crypto. And there's this looming idea that as all of the Robinhood traders and all the people that are playing in the short squeeze mania are being shut down or are unable to trade on the exchanges that they want to, that there could be this movement away from traditionals into crypto, where they don't have to deal with those kind of issues. Thus, of course, always the attraction of a decentralized asset base here. So I think we got to be careful here, though. Right now, the technical count here is complex. And I'm going to tell you that I think, as is always my approach to technical analysis, is what is the simplest thing that I can apply to what I'm seeing. It's easy to overcomplicate Elliott Wave. It's so easy, and I think that's often the mistake most people make. But if we try and simplify and just let price action dictate what looks like the most probable count and the path of least resistance. So as I sit here looking at this, I'm sitting here, Sunday, it's midday for me here in Austin. This is going to sound counterintuitive, but my view here is that the simplest explanation of what we're doing here is that, well, clearly we're correcting, right? So if we want to really simplify, we're coming off of this low and we're just in the process of correcting it. Now, the Elliott Wave analysis here, applying our rule set and guidelines, it would appear that the simplest explanation here is that we've got a combination here. So we'd be looking for a WXYXZ. Seems to be how we can accommodate all the threes that we're seeing, right? So we know the market corrects in threes and trends in fives. That's our basic principle of Elliott Wave. And this is just a whole lot of threes. So thus, I think that gives us the simplest explanation in terms of how to label this. But ultimately, right, the point of the labeling is to anticipate what comes next. Now, I've made a couple of changes here based on the length of time here. And it's really only one change here. I had been considering this as a 1-2 and then into another 1-2, but it's getting so distorted in the time relationship here that I think we've got to move to a running flat. Now, why does that matter? Because it's going to affect what we're pulling from on the assumption that this stays as a 2 and that this stays as the corrective wave structure off of this impulse here. That this right here, it's just too short relative to what's happening here. So I think we have to go to a running flat here. So what I'm trying to get here. So I think we do have to go into an ABC here, running flat. I can still count. I can complete the count just as easily here. I can still get into a 1, 2, 3, 4, and I can get my impulse here to come off of this 1, 2. Now, additionally, what's influencing that thinking is just the wave relationship. So as I just draw it up here, using that pivot low here as the start of the proposed 1. Now, if I pull into my 2 here, the new 2, You know, part of it was thinking, oh, if I go here, if I use this as the 2, well, look, I'm damn near to that 2618. Well, if I come up here now, we go into the idea of a running flat. I'm coming a little short of the 2618. It's not a requirement that we tag it to the tick. It's kind of giving us a range here, a target. And that's, as we often talk about, this is an expectation for about as far as you would anticipate a 3 going before a correction. Now, that's, of course, nothing dictates that it couldn't go farther or that it must go that far, but that's kind of the range that I'm seeing here. But I'm much more influenced by the length of time here than I am whether we're to the tick or within a few ticks. And then the internal subdivision here is all, while Elliotticians may differ on exactly how we're getting here, I don't think any would differ that coming off of this low down here at what were you, 17, 18-ish here, that this is an impulse, right? Now this is the process of correcting that impulse. But again, where we're drawing the 2 from is going to affect where we're targeting here. If this is going to continue to soften here and come down to challenge some of this level here that we had drawn up weeks ago here, this range here, just identifying this little pivot structure here. Well, clearly we can see where our support is. Now note here, I'm on an 8-hour here. Look how the Vegas wave, right? Just tagging it beautifully. So while at this moment in time, we can't really be definitive about where we are. I'm going to look at what I think is the more probable outcome here and then kind of a wild card. Should the market really accelerate coming off of this retrace, which I think is less likely based on what we're going to look at here. It just becomes a question now of where would we anticipate the next level of support that might present itself as a buying opportunity. So just, again, kind of trying to be not overly fancy, but just how can we simplify this? Well, we got to back up a little bit here and say, okay, first assumption that coming off of the COVID low, this is a 1-2. Now, as I have it counted right now, that the implication would be if that's the 1-2, we are still seeking the third off of the 1-2 that came off the COVID low. So thus 1-2, 1-2, 3, working on the 4 of the impulse coming off of that 2. Sounds complicated, but it's really not. So at this point, we're correcting here. I think we can all agree on this, whether we're looking at it in log or not. It kind of pops out to you more as a corrective zone here coming off of the 1-2 in log scale. You can really analyze this in both. I'm going to stay out of log here because we're going to focus on this section here. But until I'm forced to change it, I'm sticking with the 1-2 here into my impulsive 3. Now we're seeking the 4. Now we're a lot of complexity in getting here, but if we just look at the 3s, I think we can come up with a reasonable path here of what to anticipate. And then ultimately, of course, the assumption that I would propose here is that when we finish this correction, we're certainly off to challenge those highs, and I would anticipate that we're off to new highs. So let's dig in here a little bit and see what we can make sense of in here. Now I'm on an 8-hour here. I'm going to go down to here. A 4 will do it just fine. So looking at this now, we had looked at a couple of scenarios here. We were kind of trying to get to the idea that we had finished the correction here. That's how we looked at it last week. That okay, maybe I could squeeze it in here. But at this point, based on what we see now that we've had coming off of that low, I think now we got to recognize here that without a force fit, this has really got to be a 3, right? And this has got to be a 3. And while this is a little uglier, I think we got to stay with a 3 here. So now, as a purist is going to look at this and say, well, couldn't we have an ABC here? Oh, pardon me. If you were thinking, oh, okay, if this was the low, could this be the ABC and we're done here? Right? Couldn't that be an explanation that would get us into, perhaps starting off here into something more bullish? Well, strict Elliott would imply that for that to be a B of a flat, let's get our platinum zone here, we'd want to get to at least to the 887, right? Purists are going to tell you got to get to the 90. So just process of elimination. If we stick to the hard rule set here, we can't have a flat here. We can't go A, B, C. All right, so I think here, this is where, while I do not consider myself a purist, I think leaning into that gets us to a better explanation here. So by eliminating this as an A, B, which we had considered. By eliminating that process of elimination, we have to go with the ABC, and this plays better as an X. So ABC into a W, ABC into an X, and then again, because this is really, we got to consider this a completed 3, we got to go ABC into a Y. Now here we come into what clearly looks like a 3, right? So, you got to kind of dig it out there. Down for the B, and then here's the Friday action pump with the, from courtesy of Elon. We get the pump, but then it doesn't sustain. And you can kind of look here, right, with this pretty substantial wick rejection as we get up here. So you have it on both sides. So down here, clear wick rejection as we get down here. So we have a pretty clear zone of support and resistance here that we can just, we can kind of, if I can get this hot for me, just kind of looking here, just pull it across, and just looking at where we're rejecting. You could probably pull that down even lower. So we're trying to get up here, right? So we're trying to go chase those highs, but there's no, the buyers are not coming in here, they're rejecting. So you're getting clear evidence here of selling here. So if you caught this, right, or any of you that might have caught this, I mean, this was a pretty good little pump here. So if we just use the internals here, well, we got up to the 1272, right? So wicks getting past the 100, but it does look corrective. And it's kind of the same thing here. So you almost get the same relationship here. So if we're pulling from here into the proposed A from the B, now we're getting to a 1618. So as that was unfolding, as it started to come down, well, maybe you're thinking, okay, possibility here, maybe we're going to carry on here. But now with this, as we roll over here, this looks like we're headed down to complete the Z to give us the 4 down here. Now the channel, okay, I'm just using the pivots here, a little throw over here. Looks fairly reasonable. We're kind of hovering on the midline here. There's a bullish alternate that we'll look at here before we wrap up. But at this point in time, I think we've got to be anticipating that we're seeking a three-legged move down here to give us our 4. In a combination like that, it sounds more complicated than it's just a series of 3s. That's really all that's happening, right? So we get the W, X, Y, X. Now, can we finish with another ABC? It's hard to call this as to whether or not that's the A or the A's got more legs down here. But at some point, we're anticipating that we'd come down here. This would complete the combo, and then we'd be off looking for a challenge of those highs to try and complete the impulse off of this 1-2. All right, so just looking at this as we come down, now what do we have here? Well, we go down to an hourly. Do we really have a whole lot? Maybe that would be a mighty shallow B, right? But I think if we step back to the 4-hour here and just use what we know is a range we might anticipate. We know Bitcoin loves the golden zone, right? We know the algos are all in here. So if we just simple, right? Simple as we can make it, right? Swing low to swing high. Now let me change that. Let's go here. So let me get my targets on there. Let's go to, all right. So now we kind of fatten this zone here. So if we look at this, if this is going to hold as the 2 with that adjustment as the 2, well, we've come down, we've wicked the 50. We're getting, again, wick rejection here. So we come down here into this range between 28 and 29, rejected. Now we test again, rejected, but we're getting the same thing up here. So if this is going to come down and head towards the golden zone off of this, while that would be less ideal to an Elliottician to have the 4 going that deep, well, we did have quite the 3 here. So I wouldn't have scripted it this way as the ideal zone, but at this point in time, I think we got to consider that as a reasonable location, which would propose coming down here to the 26.8, somewhere in that range. You can see the geometry kind of fits with that. You could certainly see how we could do this if we can get a clean 3. I would be anticipating one more push up, right? A B is always a B or a 2, whatever it may be. It's always an attempt to break that pivot here that I would anticipate that would fail. And if we're going to come down here, that's where I would be looking to start adding to longs. Now, always the question is the individual trader's choice. If you want to try and hit the turn, or you want to wait for the first pullback, right? And then try and get into that as we start off into what would be the 1 of the 5th going up higher. So I would consider this kind of a no trade zone. There's not enough evidence here to suggest, okay, time to buy. And then we're going to look at total 2 and Bitcoin D here. Sort of implies that there's likely more weakness here to come in Bitcoin. So if you're a long-term holder, this whole area down here is not a bad area to be looking for accumulation. Right? So you can look at what some of the bigger players are doing. So for example, here's Grayscale. Right, I just popped this up off of Blockport. So Grayscale has added 2,312 Bitcoin, or 79 million over the last 7 days. Do they care what's going on here? Do they care? No, they don't, right? Because they're playing this for the next 3 to 5 years and beyond. So for us sitting here, as technicians trying to be as precise as we can about entry locations, you got to define what you're trying to accomplish here. Are you trying to, get some small little swings in here that you might trade with leverage? Or are you just looking for the next area to start accumulating? I think at this point we got to look at this area down here as your next accumulation zone. Now, nothing says that we have to break here. We don't have to go down to the golden zone here. Right now, I don't have enough here to really project so that I could say, oh, there's the A, there's a clear B. Does that look like the B? Well, could be, but it looks more to me like we're working on the A here. So I would anticipate that there's going to be another little push up higher before it rolls over again. So I would not be, so let me be very clear. I would not encourage a sell there. I almost never short Bitcoin. And then back to where we started, if we're going to see some of the Robinhood traders and the retail traders now coming into Bitcoin trying to pump it, I don't want to be short. Right, that just something back of your mind. Keep that in the back of your head. That if that massive retail decides that Bitcoin's their next target, I wouldn't want to be short. Now, do they have the capital to come in and be buying Bitcoin up in the 30 to 32? Well, maybe not. Where are they more likely to go? It strikes me that they're more likely to go to alts. So then you got to say, well, if Bitcoin's is rolling over here to come down and test the support zone down here, how are alts going to look? What is Bitcoin D and total 2 going to start to look like? Well, let's just allow for this at this moment in time as the A, the B, anticipating the B. So, right, it's not a crystal ball, but it's if I were to just lay it out in the roadmap that I'd be anticipating, the next time that I'd be looking to add to my longs would be down here if I can get a test of this golden zone. And you might even just fatten it up like this. Say anywhere from, call it 29 to 26 and change. Anywhere in here is where this seems like the reasonable accumulation zone for the next leg up. Well, let's go look at Bitcoin D, right? Because this is influencing my decision making here a little bit, right? So coming off of the low here, we can get an impulse into that. Right, we don't overlap the 1. Now this gets a little wonky, and this also, it looks to me like we've got to go A, B, C into a W. This is clearly a 3, and like we're softening pretty hard here. So if Bitcoin D is coming down, also look, right, we're coming towards the 50 in the golden zone. If we're coming down here along with Bitcoin, well, that creates opportunities for the alts, right? Which is, I've always said, if we're going to have a true explosion in crypto here, the alts have got to be a part of it. It can't just be Bitcoin, and Bitcoin gets all the media attention. But if this is coming down, if we're doing an A, so think of Bitcoin, right? If we're going to do a B and then come down to that C, that's where I think the opportunities are right now. Now, this is interesting here. I'm using the last pivot that before we rolled down here, and you'll note we've just tagged the 618, right? We just hit the golden zone and then look at the reaction here. So you think, right, is it technical here? Are there algorithms in here? Hard to know, but that's not insignificant. That we're tagging that to the tick and then look at the reaction. So my anticipation here is that we're going to come down and we're going to challenge this same little area here that we've kind of been talking about. We're coming down to challenge at the 50% level. Well, that's very bullish for alts. So coming off of Bitcoin D and then looking at total 2, well, it's not as clean as you might like. But I think same kind of idea here. I think off the COVID low, 1, 2, right, looks probably going to have to work that as an ABC to get the 2 here. Now we can go 1, 2. This also, it's a little, right? Is that we've got an expanded B wave down to a C? You don't have to be that. You don't have to be an Elliott master here to just look. That's corrective, right? So we get the swing, we go sideways, we correct. Now we get a move up, we correct. Now this is getting kind of choppy up here. So if this is going to break here and the alts are going to go, This is a bit of a educated guess as to what we have here. Let me go. Let's go to a 2 hour. Take a look at that. It's a little choppy, right? The whole thing is choppy, and we look kind of top heavy here. This is going to need some legs here. So I think the bull case here would imply that we can work here into an A. We've got to go into a running flat again. Now, part of what influences me here is that in the 2017 rip, there were just running flats nonstop all the way up. Right, it was constantly, it's an impatient market, right? It's just nonstop running flats as the C was above the A, right? It was just the whole way up. Now, there's some technical pivots in here where here to here we get a break. All right, so this if we look at this swing low to this pivot here, get it right on that. Clear break here. So we keep looking, right? So if this one breaks, you go back one pivot. Well, look what we just did here, right? So that again, so you think of Bitcoin D having just tagged that on the upside, and then total 2 is tagging it on the downside. Well, I can get a 1 off of this, and then note what we do on the 2, right? If this is going to hold as the 1, right? Golden zone, right? So while granted, right, it's not this one here, we go back one, boom, golden zone, golden zone. So where are we headed next? I think this is very encouraging for alts to be looking to go after a bigger 3 up here, which should be very bullish for the whole space. Now, we don't want Bitcoin to just crater, right? That has the potential to pull everything down. But if Bitcoin's going to drift lower, I think alts could really explode here. So this 1-2 here is kind of interesting to me. So of course, what do we get here in total 2? We get a golden corner. Now, where are we headed? Right, that would be that would be great news for the stronger alt projects here, but they're all over the place now. And again, all of these Robinhood traders, if they're coming into the crypto space, which there is evidence that they are, they're more likely to stay with alts than to be loading up on Bitcoins, particularly given the Bitcoin chart looking relatively bearish. Now, they're likely not applying advanced Elliott Wave, but they're just looking at what can they afford, right? And where can they see that percentage return? I mean, look at what Ripple's done. When you can buy them for a penny or two and then pump them to 30, 40 cents, the potential return there is going to be very appealing to that mindset, right? They're likely not hardcore technicians. They're looking for momentum. All right, so Elliott Wave will let us identify where that crowd dynamic is at play. Where is the momentum? Where is the greed? Right? Where's the greed? I mean, not to be crass about it, but that's really what we're measuring, right? There is no limit to greed. There's no limit to fear. So when the greed is really running high, as we certainly see across the markets, you've got greed potentially brewing in crypto, and you've got fear in traditional assets. Right, so interesting times. So I would certainly be looking at your strongest alt projects now as where the opportunity lies, as we let Bitcoin resolve what it's doing here. Whatever it's going to do down here. If we're coming down to this zone, great, right? Alts are going to run. So there's certainly plenty of opportunity, but I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist. I'm not Bitcoin only. That certainly is my largest holding. But I'm kind of watching here carefully, looking for the next opportunity to reaccumulate, and I'm willing to wait here. I might take a nibble at the 50, but I would be aggressive if we get down here into this 26, 27 range. I'm not anticipating much below that, but shit. Of course, you never know for sure. Now, just here, 23 minutes. Let's look at there is a bullish alternate here that we're trying to hold right now. It's getting tested right now. This is kind of the wild card. Well, let me take it out of log here. Oh, it looks like perhaps we've just broken it here. So this was the alternate that I was considering here. That perhaps did we break it? Here, we'll take a look here. Let's see. This was the idea that we had considered that if we were going to come down here, if it was going to be a WXY, right? We could think of it that way. Again, the idea that this is it labels more cleanly as an ABC, right? Because of the impulse here. So we had kind of talked ourselves into perhaps, okay, maybe the 4 is in here. Well, there's an outside chance here that we still have that in play. So you could read this here. I know this is a little hard to see, but you could consider this as a WXY into the 4 here, and maybe outside chance. This is 1, 2, because we can work into a 3. We'd be just now hitting the golden zone, going for a leading diagonal to come out of here. Now it has to get beyond the algo target here, because if it's going to be a leading diag, 3 is longer than 1, 5 has to be longer than 3. So you've got targets up here that would be pushing it past the old high at 42. Let's zoom in here because it looks like we may have, oh God, look at that. Hang on, let's see, did we tag it? Let's get it as precise as we can. Looks like we may have just broken it. Let me get that little 5 out of there. All right, let's get on the tick there. Did we break it? Let's get on the tick. It's about as close as it can get. It would not be ideal, right? As I've said many times, when you're looking at a diagonal, really where you want to see that 4 hold is at the 50. But it's, again, remember, an algorithm does not care about the Elliott count. That's us, right? We care about the Elliott count. We're trying to identify what they're doing. Well, is that enough right there? If that holds and if we rip right out of here, you can't eliminate this possibility, right? If that holds and we come out of this, right? So come Sunday night, right? If we start pushing out of here, every Elliottician is going to be looking at this and say, hey, wait a minute, maybe we do have a diag coming out of there. It's hanging by a thread. So you're hanging on the idea that an algo has defended there. And just like in the prior chart we looked at, where this one clearly has broken, so we got to go back one. So if this three-legged here is coming down here, and of course the other possibility here is that this is an ABC and we're coming into the 2. It's possible. Right, so this is kind of the wild card. I'm watching that here. I would put an alert under that golden zone. If it breaks that, then I'm much more heavily leaning into the WXYXZ, that we're going down to test those mid-20s. If this holds, right? So if I check Bitcoin in the morning and we're over 34, this gets interesting here. The geometry is not great here. So if you think of, you can't do it this way. So you're going to have to do it this way. Right? This doesn't quite work. It's an outside chance that we're doing that. And of course, as I said, the alternate would be we could do it this way. We could just trade this as an ABC, right? ABC into the 2, maybe. All right, pull that back out. And then we're kind of back in here into the idea that we've got a WXY 1 going in now, 2 going in now. Bitcoin's so full of surprises, right? Don't be surprised by that. Of the 2, this would not be my primary, but I want to recognize that that's a candidate here. If this starts to go, that's how we're going to label it. So if it does that, if this holds as the 2, we're looking for a 3 here. So the next time to be looking to get long would be on the B into the C of the 3. Right, and then you can just start projecting up. You wouldn't anticipate necessarily a 1618, but I might be looking for second algo target. Maybe we can finish this. Remember, if it's going to be a leading diag, then the 3 has to be longer than the 1. So just giving it some easy targets if that holds as the 1, right? If. Right, we got to get at least to 42, right? So we got to get, now you can kind of put the whole thing together and say, okay, well, if I can get up and challenge that high and break that high, well, then I got a candidate here, right? It'd be more typical to go 127, 138 in a diag, right? But then 5 is going to need to be longer than 3. So now we're pushing, and we're over 50 here. You could make the case also, right? You've got a golden corner here, same thing. If that holds, right? Always the caveat. If this pivot holds and we come out of here, well, we got a clear target. Right? We know, right? It doesn't have to get, it could be here, right? You don't know, but the odds are 80% that we get to the median line. So just a few things to think about. Right now, I'm keeping powder dry. I'm looking into some of the alts that I like. But Bitcoin is going to be interesting to see how we look first thing in the morning. Fortunately, if this breaks and we head lower, then we can eliminate this possibility. I think it gets very less likely that we're going to have a deep 2. And again, you could go 786, you go 887, but this is the technical pivot you'd hope for if you're clinging to the idea that we're still heading higher and we're not going to go down and break this low, or at least challenge these lows. That's how I would be approaching it down here. If we break this too far and we start to unload, then this is off the board, right? It's one process of elimination. We eliminate this, and then we know we're down here looking for the next pivot off of one of these technical locations for the WXYXZ. All right, guys, there's an update. So members, I'm guessing we're going to have a lot of a deep look at all of the alts tomorrow. So you guys know I'll be looking for your charts to be posted as to the alts that you're interested in. So I'm anticipating a busy day. You know, that's, of course, if you're watching on YouTube, that's how we do it now. So members post up their charts, and then from there, we kind of review them together and see how it looks. And it's also a way for me to kind of get a feel for what their skill level looks like and where they are in their progression as technicians. All right, so there you go. That's a pretty good update here. That's everything that I think is worth reporting, but keep in mind, big money. You think Grayscale, PayPal, Cash App, institutions, right? You certainly have institutions getting openly bullish about the long-term impact or long-term forecast for Bitcoin. So any sort of correction here, what do you think they're doing, right? Don't give them your Bitcoin. Okay, guys, talk to you later.